Hey, good Wednesday, everybody. Welcome back. Hopefully, we're having a wonderful day out there. Unfortunately, though, we do have Hurricane Francine currently barreling towards the coastline of Louisiana, where we are expecting major impacts this evening upon landfall. But unfortunately, that's also not the only threat we're watching. Obviously, Francine will move inland, causing inland flooding and a tornado risk. But even outside of that, other areas now to watch in the tropics, including close to home. And I wouldn't be surprised to see another tropical system making landfall in the United States within a week. So again, things have really upticked here in the tropics over the past couple of weeks, specifically, or really over the past week in general. We're starting to look a lot more like peak hurricane season, and climatologically speaking, we're there. This is basically the peak of the year, but we will have to watch through the rest of September and October for potential tropical activity out here. And again, things getting quite active on that side of things. Now, if you're new here, welcome. And if you haven't already subscribed, definitely do so. Like the video, comment, let me know what you're seeing out in your neck of the woods, and consider sharing the video with somebody that you think might find some use in it. Now, with that said, let's go and jump into that forecast because, again, there is a lot to discuss here. And we'll start right with Francine and how she currently looks here on satellite. Here's kind of the center. Well, let me pick a color to see a little bit easier. Here's the center of the storm. Definitely has some pretty robust convection, and it's staying relatively persistent, indicating a strengthening storm system. Now, the structure with the storm is not perfect. You'll notice, again, this is the center, so it's a little lopsided here with a lot of convection on that kind of right front quadrant, as the storm is dealing with a little bit of shear out of the west and the southwest. Also, it's been fighting some dry air, but all things considered, it's fighting both of these things off relatively well, and again, has managed to deepen that pressure pretty significantly since this time yesterday, with a good probably 20 millibar drop, even 25 millibar drop or so in the storm. Now, obviously, that means the storm is strengthening. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that the wind field has come up a lot with that pressure. And we'll take a look at that here in just a second. But again, just to reiterate, an impressive looking hurricane on satellite, one that definitely, unfortunately, can do some damage. And again, this is the coastline of Louisiana. So the storm is getting close, not very far, and landfall is expected this evening for you folks there on the Gulf Coast of Louisiana. Now, latest forecast from the National Hurricane Center, again, pressure down to 976 millibars, winds at about 90 miles an hour. This is expected to potentially increase back up near a 100-mile-an-hour hurricane. That gets us to a Category 2 storm. One that obviously is enough to cause problems, and because of that, we do have hurricane warnings and tropical storm warnings in effect for really, the entire coast of Louisiana has at least tropical storm force warnings, but hurricane warnings specifically right here into this path of kind of the cone where landfall is expected. I think the most likely place for landfall right now is probably going to be in and around Morgan City, Louisiana, maybe just a little bit west of there, which unfortunately is going to bring the worst of the surge right into this part of the state. And again, a lot of this is just low-lying swampy beaches here at the coast. So a lot of this is going to get overtaken by the ocean, but even portions of Morgan City itself, Bayou Vista here, back towards Baldwin, and kind of these other communities. Sorry, it's kind of hard to read the way that the map has it overlaid. But Delaware, Louisiana, Bordeaux, Louisiana, Dubuque, Louisiana, and a lot of these other kind of places, including New Iberia. So again, just to name some communities there, again, going to see some pretty rough impacts here, including also wind. So again, like I said, storm surge is going to be a problem. Any of this kind of shaded in area you see, that's area that's going to be overtaken by the ocean. And again, Louisiana is such a low-lying state. This is going to go miles and miles inland here, the storm surge, as these swamps really fill up. So an impactful storm, but even going further inland, we will see impacts as the storm does move up the Mississippi River Valley through the state of Mississippi throughout tomorrow, and eventually getting up near the Memphis area Thursday night into Friday, where again we'll see an inland flooding threat and a tornado threat, which will be a concern as well. Now, the latest, and I'm going to go ahead and refresh this real quick just to get the latest data here. So we do have the hurricane hunters out there right now. So depending on when you're watching this data might be a little old, but nonetheless, the important thing to note here is the latest kind of pressure values that they're finding here is down near 970 millibars. So it's very impressive pressure for only a Category 1 hurricane. But the wind speeds are, flight level getting up near 80 knots or so. So that probably is about 90 miles an hour at the surface here with those winds. So again, a strengthening storm. This time yesterday looked a lot worse on satellite. Today it looks much stronger and has the rest of today over the water. Although kind of at the end of its cycle here, as it's moving inland, I do think that wind shear and dry air will play a little bit more on the storm. So I think where we're at right now is going to be probably about where we're at near landfall. Again, potentially a tad bit stronger. I think it's probably going to peak during this afternoon in intensity and then come back down again to about where we are now. Upon landfall this evening. But that does not change the impacts. The impacts will be the same. Again, storm surge is a big concern, 5 to 10 feet from Vermilion Bay all the way down to Port Fourchon. We could see plenty of storm surge problems. Lake Pontchartrain back towards the mouth of the Mississippi River here. And even into Mobile Bay, 2 to 4 feet of storm surge. Isolated spots could get more than that here, 4 to 6 feet. So storm surge is definitely a concern here. Probably the biggest concern, I would say, overall, although wind will be a concern as well. But unfortunately, you cannot run from the ocean, and storm surge is the #1 killer in tropical cyclones worldwide. So it's really just something you want to pay attention to. And if somebody tells you it's time to evacuate, listen to them because it's going to really work out the best for you. Now, we will also see some freshwater flooding here today through tomorrow, a moderate risk of flash flooding from New Orleans through really the entire kind of bottom of the boot of Louisiana here up through Jackson, Mississippi, and through really just southern Mississippi in general. A lot of rain on the way, but even the days following here, I know these maps are small on the right here, but you get the idea that flooding threat could continue into the weekend, and we'll definitely hope that isn't quite as bad as maybe some of the models show. The good news, if anything, I think the inland flooding threat has come down a little compared to what it looked like a day or two ago, which obviously is good. However, a threat that has not come down is that tornado threat. Again, today the the Storm Prediction Center does have a slight risk up for tornadoes. So this is a level 2 out of 5 threat of a couple isolated tornadoes, some of which could be kind of strong here. Again, these are going to be very strong couplets offshore that try to move inland, and some of them absolutely will. Specifically over this part of the world, it can happen easily. Again, the #1 reason that these big, strong couplets offshore or water spouts dissipate when they hit the land is that force of friction kind of messes with the circulation. Well, over Louisiana and kind of these areas, it's very swampy, it's very flat. So yes, there's some friction that's going to help, but it's not nearly as strong as, for example, the Carolinas, which, you hit the land and generally it's land there. So, either way though, we'll see that tornado threat today as well as tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're watching you folks into Alabama, Florida Panhandle, even portions of western Georgia. Again, a couple isolated tornadoes through the overnight as well could be possible, and into tomorrow afternoon and evening. Definitely could see a couple tornadoes work on through. So with that said, let's go ahead and time this out for you. The latest impacts and timing. Again, the storm continuing to strengthen here. Eventually, throughout the day today, things are going to deteriorate for much of Louisiana, southern Mississippi, and southern Alabama. Again, for that tornado threat, watching these little bands here. I'll just kind of circle this general area. This kind of pocket of these little cells that you see within it, as that rotates inland, this will be where we have that highest tornado threat. So watching that, but heavy rain and wind, again, right near the center of the storm, specifically the state of Louisiana. We're really going to see those conditions go downhill this afternoon as winds pick up, rainfall rates pick up, and then eventually we get landfall this evening, probably right around sunset, maybe an hour or two before sunset. And this is when the worst of the wind will begin to work on through. Now, the good news is I talked about that dry air. Notice here's the center of the storm. Notice to the south side, there's really not much convection at all. I do think by the time we get to landfall, the northern side will definitely be the more significant side of the storm, and really it already is. So definitely that the kind of good news there is once you get through that northern eye wall, the backside should be a lot less rough, and conditions should improve. Now, through the Sunshine State today, through Florida, plenty of afternoon showers and storms, not directly due to Francine per se, but still this kind of stalled out frontal boundary, included with a little bit of that flow from Francine, going to help to fire up some storms. Don't completely rule out even an isolated tornado in this region if we can get enough vorticity, but really the bigger tornado threat will be through Louisiana, southern Mississippi, Alabama, and the Florida Panhandle. Now, we go through overnight tonight, and that's when all of the rain works inland. The winds will pick up inland. Also, the tornado threat continues and even potentially ramps up a little bit this evening and overnight, as well as tomorrow morning. Look at this cluster of very strong kind of supercellular showers offshore that try to work inland. and work into that tornado threat zone for today as well as tomorrow. And you can even see Thursday afternoon, definitely some gusty winds through Mississippi, Alabama, also some pretty good rainfall. But the bigger concern tomorrow, I think, will be that tornado threat. Specifically, notice how we get some breaks in the rain here. That's going to increase our instability values. And as these tropical rain bands rotate inland, we'll definitely see some tornadoes tomorrow as well, again, through Alabama. Especially, look at this, tomorrow afternoon and evening. This is probably the peak of it. If I were to just take a quick sounding here for my own curiosity, yeah, definitely a sounding that would support a tornado or two. In fact, I've been saying this for the past couple of days. I wouldn't be surprised to see a localized tornado outbreak by the time all is said and done. So in my mind, when I say that, we could see 10 to 20 tornadoes in this storm's lifetime from Louisiana up through Alabama, Mississippi, Florida Panhandle, and potentially, again, even into western Georgia. Now, after that, again, I think overnight Thursday, we could still see a couple strong storms, including a couple tornadoes, maybe even trying to work its way up into the Nashville area. But I think by the time we get to Friday, the model doesn't go quite that far out. The severe weather threat and even the flooding threat kind of dies down a little bit, but we'll take a look at those inland impacts a little bit more in depth later on, including you folks in the Carolinas and the Ohio River Valley. Now, wind gusts, again, obviously, it is a tropical system. It is a hurricane after all, so it will be windy. We can see winds gusting up near 100 miles an hour at times here through the worst hit areas of Louisiana. I think sustained winds will probably be, again, in that 80 mile an hour range, maybe a little bit stronger than that. We'll just kind of have to wait and see how the storm evolves today, but still enough to cause problems. Obviously, if you're getting hurricane force winds and hurricane force wind gusts, it's going to be cause for concern, and that will continue through this evening, and those winds will even pick up further inland. By the time we're waking up tomorrow morning here through Mississippi and Alabama, these again are wind gusts, and I would probably subtract about 5 or 10 miles an hour from these totals, but we could gust up near 50 miles an hour at times here. A couple places maybe even gusting up near 60, so definitely could see those tropical storm impacts continue inland for our Thursday. I would definitely expect some school closures due to that. You can't really get buses on the roads with those strong winds. And then eventually just continues inland. Those strong winds, gusty winds, continue near tropical storm strength throughout the day Wednesday, although weakening throughout the day. I think by the afternoon, the highest wind gusts will probably be more like 45, 50 compared to the morning, where it could be 55, 60, maybe 65 miles an hour. And then again, kind of calming down throughout the day there as the storm moves further inland. All right, very quickly, significant tornado parameters. Again, this afternoon and evening, the worst of it over the bayous of Louisiana, southern Mississippi, southern Alabama, and into the Florida Panhandle. And then we get to Tuesday afternoon, and we really uptick these numbers here through central Alabama. So Birmingham, Tuscaloosa, back down towards Talladega. Again, could see a couple tornadoes tomorrow, as I mentioned before. And then that could even continue through the overnight of Thursday and Friday afternoon here. Still a couple tornado ingredients lingering around, so we'll watch it for sure. But I do think tonight and tomorrow will be the worst of the tornado threat. Not to say it can't continue into Friday, just probably won't be the same that it will be the next 36 hours or so. All right, well, I told you that's not all that we got to worry about. Unfortunately, yeah, a lot going on in the tropics here. Specifically, we just talked about Francine, so let's mark that off the list of the to-do list here. These two areas down here, I'm also going to mark these off the list because they're kind of smaller, weaker areas to watch. Also, most of the models are not picking up on them right now. Not to say that they couldn't develop, but they're kind of windowed to develop, I think, is shrinking. I'm not super worried about those. So that leaves this area off the southeast coastline and this area kind of out into the main development region. Out of those two, my number one concern is this area off the southeast, just due to proximity. And a lot of the models are really kind of getting excited about this one and try to develop this early next week into a tropical storm and even work it directly into the Carolinas about a week or so from now. So that's going to be the number one concern. This area out of the Atlantic has a much higher chance of developing, a 90% chance of development in the next 7 days. The good news with that one right now is the track looks generally like it's going to try to avoid land, and we'll definitely hope that's the case. But either way, we'll keep you up to date. All right, let's start with this area off the coast of the southeast. We're going to look at the European and the GFS model. And this is Sunday afternoon. So at this point, Francine is long dissipated. Now, we'll still have scattered showers and storms in the east for sure, but all things considered, a storm that has very much weakened. What happens, though, is we've been talking about this stalled out frontal boundary over Florida that led to Francine developing down into the Gulf. Well, it could do it again, but this time off the southeast coastline. Look at this Sunday afternoon. Here's kind of that stalled boundary. And right along that boundary, we get an area of low pressure to deepen and develop here and form into a tropical storm on the latest European model, and then strengthens it again late this weekend. This is next Monday. And then makes landfall with a tropical storm here next Monday evening right into the Myrtle Beach area, and would obviously bring tropical impacts. So it's something that kind of just showed up on the models yesterday afternoon and has continued into today, and then I think eventually works that well inland up into the Appalachia chain. So it's definitely an interesting scenario. It's a plausible one, I think, too. Again, anytime we get these stalled out frontal boundaries over areas of the Gulf Stream or the Gulf of Mexico, generally this is a possibility. So watching it for sure. Again, our folks in the Carolinas, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, Virginia, gonna want to watch this one carefully. Again, if the conditions are right and it's got a long enough time, it could definitely develop into something feisty. But at the very least, it could bring some, pretty heavy rainfall inland early next week. Now we look at the GFS and we'll see, well, is it showing the same thing? This is Saturday afternoon, and sure enough, here we go. Look at this area of low pressure beginning to deepen there along that frontal boundary and really beginning to close off a little bit and forms again into a tropical storm, even stronger than the European, about 990 millibars, working up into southeastern North Carolina there near Jacksonville, North Carolina, and then again continues inland with heavy rainfall and probably some gusty winds and a bit of a severe weather threat early next week. So again, there's not too much else I can tell you about it right now. I can't say, exactly when it's going to happen, exactly how strong it's going to be, because unfortunately, we just don't really know all that much right now. But I will show you the ensembles, and there's definitely a signal, although the operational runs are a little more excited about it right now than our ensemble members. So this is not set in stone to happen, but it is definitely something we need to watch. Again, some of these European members develop, it's just not a lot. If we take a look at the GFS, a little bit more impressive, but again, it's just struggling to find where the center of this would form, and you would expect that. Again, if we go back here, let me back this up even a little bit more here. This big frontal boundary stretches basically all the way across this entire area of the Atlantic. So if it develops, again, it could develop down here, it could develop out here, it could develop in the center. It's got a lot of different options on where that center of circulation could finally try to get its act together. So definitely want to watch for that for sure. But that actually, could you see any of what I just showed you? Yeah, you could. Okay, good. All right, so outside of that, let's take a look. I know I'm switching maps like crazy here, but let's take a look at that other area out of the Atlantic. Again, I mentioned a couple areas to watch here, but the bigger one is right here. This has a 90% chance of development within the next 7 days. And it's tagged Invest 93L, I believe. I probably should have checked beforehand, but I think that's what we're calling this one. So if we take a look at some ensemble members with this one, again, overall speaking, and this goes out, I think, 7 or 10 days. None of these members get it near basically anybody. Now, some of them do develop it into a powerful hurricane, definitely, and it could be something to watch on satellite. But just, we don't know a whole lot about this. And I've been saying this for the past couple of days out here is we have storm systems. We just don't really know exactly what their long-term plan is. But most likely scenario, if this develops, would be a curve out to sea. Not to say that's definite, but that is the most likely scenario right now, which is definitely a piece of good news. All right, what's going on back home? Let's talk a little bit about this. Taking a look at satellite imagery over the United States. Obviously, here's Francine, and here is this big stalled out frontal boundary that, again, could lead to development next week off the Carolina coastline, like we mentioned. Outside of that, big time trough swinging on through the Pacific Northwest, one of many to come. So we are seeing a lot of cloud cover and showers through the Rockies today, and that could also lead to some severe weather over the Dakotas here through the coming days as well. Now, radar this morning and afternoon, again, relatively calm outside of Francine. Now, obviously, bringing plenty of rain up through Texas, or excuse me, really through Louisiana, I should say. And then that stalled out frontal boundary, bringing rain through Florida and just the Gulf Coast states in general. Out through the Pacific Northwest, like I mentioned, that trough leading to some shower and storm activity. Also seeing a couple showers working on through the Great Lakes region. So other than Francine, no super big features showing up on the map. Again, that trough in the Northeast definitely bringing some showers, but nothing we haven't seen before. All right. Let's take a look now at the future for Francine here. I'm going to take a sip of water actually really quickly, so sorry. I can only talk so long without drinking anything. So Yeah, so through this week, again, Francine, like we mentioned, we're going to pick up where we left off on Thursday afternoon, and we move this ahead into time. You'll notice kind of what happens here is the rain dies out a little bit. Like I said, the storm is ingesting a lot of dry air. So I think the overall flooding threat through portions of Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, Missouri, and through this region has come down a tad. Will it rain? I do think so. I think we'll have some scattered showers and storms, but I don't think we're going to see a super big flash flooding threat. Also, we talked about a flooding threat here through the Carolinas. I definitely, again, still think we'll see showers and storms. But I think, funnily enough, this potential area of development off the Carolina coast may try to almost rob a little bit of moisture here. So, we're getting some pretty impressive ridging here, or some cold air damming into the Carolinas by this weekend, which, generally speaking, would kind of, promote rainfall as you would get this warm Atlantic air to kind of go up and over that and wring out some rain. But what could actually happen is if we get low pressure to develop here off the Carolina coast, that could actually bring winds offshore instead of onshore for parts of Georgia and the Carolinas. And that could help to limit some of those rainfall totals. Again, I still think we'll have showers this weekend, but I think the chance of a washout is becoming less. And then obviously, we move this ahead into time, and if we do get that tropical system to develop off the coastline, then that could cause problems and concern, and again, move inland and cause other, noteworthy things to happen. So also another thing I'll notice here, or mention here, a week out from now, and I'll show you in the next map, we've got multiple troughs digging out west, just meaning multiple pockets of cold air working that way. So it's going to make it chilly out there, but also is going to try to lead to the development of some low pressure through the plains, kind of those Colorado lows that we often see. And that could lead to some severe weather at some point in the next week, even within the next couple of days through the Dakotas. But this is getting into next week. Notice here some pretty widespread storms firing up there. So I do think severe weather will work back into the forecast here in the medium run. So we'll definitely want to watch out for that. Now, again, like I mentioned, this is getting towards this weekend. This is Thursday, so tomorrow, again, big trough out west, ridge in the east. So it's pretty warm in the east, all things considered, and it's pretty cool out west, and obviously, a little bit stormier there where those two air masses are clashing. But again, through this week, another big time trough dips out west. This is into early next week. So watching this, again, this could lead to the promotion of some severe weather being brought back into the forecast here through the Great Plains at some point next week. Also at the same time, again, maybe a Carolina tropical system. So a couple things on the horizon here to watch for, definitely in that time frame. And I'll show you temperatures. Again, we've got this big ridge over the eastern trough over the west. So generally speaking, it's going to be warmer than average in the east and cooler than average out west, although it's kind of if and not really at the same time. So you'll notice, again, generally speaking, warmer in the east, cooler in the west. However, where we're getting this cloud cover from Francine, that'll keep things cooler. Where we're getting rain, it'll keep things a tad bit cooler as well. But generally speaking, things try to warm up in the east outside of any tropical activity and cool down in the west, especially early next week. Again, that's a pretty big signal for some clashing air masses there that we will definitely want to watch. All right, final thing I'll show you are rainfall totals here. For the next week. Again, this is now through 7 days. So now through next Wednesday morning, Louisiana, Mississippi, obviously some pretty good rainfall out of Francine on the way. Same story for the Florida panhandle there. Potentially 3 to 5 inches of rain, probably more 2 to 4 inches of rain through much of Alabama. We move this up, and again, I would even bring these totals down probably a little bit into this region. I think we're going to get a little bit more dry air. So we'll say 1 to 3 inches of rain likely for the Ohio River Valley from, let's say, central Kentucky back through Arkansas. And then the Nashville area as well, I think maybe 2 to 4 inches of rain is possible. And then we look at the Mid-Atlantic and the Carolinas. Again, this forecast has changed a little bit. I think we could get a little bit of a Goldilocks zone here through the central Carolinas that have a little bit of a lower chance of rain compared to the western Carolinas, which could pick up some good rain over the next couple of days, and the eastern Carolinas, which obviously any tropical system would definitely increase rainfall chances. So we'll be watching all that for you. I'll keep you up to date definitely here through the coming days. But with that said, y'all have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you all tomorrow.